There, I think that should work. Can you hear me okay, Bonnie?
Yes, I
Okay.
can. Good morning. It's nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Are you feeling settled in your new home?
No,
Takes a long time, doesn't it?
a really long time. And it's, the one thing I've discovered about this whole process, moving is a young person's game. I'm
To
not
try. Yeah, I can see that.
young. So Dawn, don't move. Just stay where you are and just don't move.
That's what my husband says. Yeah, I have some ideas, but
And
that's what
then
he
you're going to
says
move
for
across
sure.
the country or something silly like that, right?
No, no, we're actually really loving Moncton. I never thought I would live in New Brunswick,
Where are you
but we
from
have.
originally?
I was a military brat, so I don't really have a sense of home, but I lived most of my adult life in Halifax.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so we've just been in Moncton 3 years. We
Wow.
moved here because Halifax is really becoming the new Toronto.
Oh, is
It's
it?
it's big, it's expensive. Moncton's getting
Really?
expensive too, but it's grown a lot and it doesn't necessarily have the infrastructure to support its growth. So yeah, we wanted a kind of a slower pace.
My cousin lives in Berwick, and
Hmm.
there's a cyclist tour that goes through Nova Scotia that I would love to do one day.
Oh, very cool.
Hmm.
I'm
Yeah,
just
it
checking
would
to
be tons.
see if the what. So I see the whiteboard. Yay, that's amazing.
Yeah, let's
Uh,
test that out.
yes. And would you
See.
like me to share my screen, or do you have something that you'd like to share first?
No, I'll share first, and then
Okay.
like basically I read off the introduction,
Okay.
and then it's all done. It's all you.
Okay.
So,
And so
and
I'll just
Corey is hanging out in the background in case we have tech issues.
wonderful. Okay. The one thing is to use the breakouts, you probably need to make me a co-host.
Yeah, I will do that more. There, you can. Oh, wait, we'll make you a co-host and then there we go. Make Dawn a co-host.
Excellent. So I should now see the breakouts. Yay, I do.
Awesome.
And I'll get the chat where I can see it. So I will keep an eye on the chat. As you know, I try to weave that into the conversation, but if I miss something, please just jump in.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm not good at doing the chat and presenting at the same time. I'm in awe of your skills because I've never been able to do it's either present or chat. I cannot do both.
Yeah.
We got a couple people trickling in. I think we left the room open so people can trickle in, less tech to manage. So your summer KT thing, that went okay. That was pretty good.
Yeah, we had quite a few registrants for that. So yeah, we were pleased. I mean, we're continuing, to build up the learning commons each time we deliver deliver a webinar, we then turn it into a course. So
Hmm. And how is I want to talk to you separately one of these days about micro credentialing and how you got there.
ah a 25-year relationship.
Yeah, because that's actually something we've been considering for KM in the AM is doing something a little more formalized
Hmm.
and at least get people some participation credit or something they can use to help add value.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, but yeah, no, that's really great. You got the micro credentials, you got the summer institute. When do you have time to actually do your work?
That's kind of the problem. That's kind of the problem right now. So I'm trying to build up some bench strength, actually.
Mm.
Try to bring on some other folks who can do pieces. Emily's actually done some coaching with me
Oh, nice.
because the visual communication is such an important piece. So yeah, we're at a moment we're kind of reconsidering, okay, where do we go from here? Like what does this look like 2 years from now, 3 years from now? Yeah. But yes, we definitely need to have a catch up now that you're half settled, quarter settled.
Well, we've got stuff everywhere and I have no idea where anything is. So it's moving chaos for I was smart this move though. I kept all of my office with me in the car.
Mm,
I did because then I could set it up right away.
yes.
And I was able to set it up so I didn't really miss a beat with work wise, but just if you saw what's behind me right now, you'd be horrified.
Trying to.
It's not as pretty as what yours looks like.
Oh, thank you. It's funny. Was just on a call this morning with somebody I hadn't met before, and he said,
Oh,
"I like your money tree. I have one too." And then
honey tree.
I scooted over to I scooted his camera over so it's funny how you can connect with what people have in the background.
It is. I usually like to have something fun. Like this is kind of my 70s feel today. Been into the 70s
When
groove.
I first met you, you had your dolls or your
Yep.
crafts or something.
I still
Yes.
got those. They live up there though. They live up there on the other shelf right now. So I still have those. And um, I've had, oh, I just all manners of fun. Doctor Who a lot. You'll see Doctor Who behind me an awful
Oh,
lot.
that's fun.
Some
I
people think I'm obsessed, but if I had a TARDIS in my backyard, David Tennant would come live with me, don't you think? If I built a TARDIS in my backyard, I think that could happen.
that Doctor Who.
Yeah, oh yeah, he's my favorite modern doctor.
Okay, because there were a number of them. Yeah, I
Two
remember seeing him when
iterations
my
of
kids were small.
and yes, so he you would have been when your kids were small. He'd have been one of the
Okay.
doctors. Yeah, they've
Okay.
had some pretty great doctors. They've had a girl doctor even. They're
Oh,
Yes, and they've had a non-gender doctor, and they've had yeah, Doctor Who's are doing a really great job at being inclusive and having different kinds of people play the main character, and I think it's awesome. Oh, people are starting to trickle in now. Good morning, everybody. But yes, not everybody's a fan, and I do tend to start citing Doctor Who if Doctor Who and Shakespeare that I cite most of the time in my conversations. It makes for an interesting mix.
indeed.
Oh, yes. Oh, good morning, everybody. We'll give people maybe 2 more minutes to jump on in and give you time to freshen up that coffee or the water, whatever your beverage of choice is this morning. And then we'll get rolling with a really exciting presenter today. If you have any technical issues, just let me know in the chat and I will hook you up with our tech guy. His name is Corey. He's hanging out in the background. So thank you, Corey. And you can pop in the chat and let us know where you're at, where you're calling in from. And Dawn, I didn't ask you, do you want to take questions throughout or do you want to wait till the end?
Throughout. This will be a very free flowing, interactive session. You as in the group, are actually going to do most of the work.
Fantastic. So definitely freshen up your coffee, folks. You're going to need the energy. All right. Well, it's 9:02, so as people trickle in, I will get started. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we gather for KM in the AM, we broadcast from Saskatchewan, which is treaties 2, 4, 5, 6, 8, and 10, as well as the territories and homeland of the Métis. And we honor our ancestors and knowledge keepers of this land and recognize that meaningful knowledge exchange, like what we're doing here today, must be rooted in respect, reciprocity, and responsibility. What do I mean by that? It's always treat people with respect, always give freely of your knowledge. We also recognize the land as our Mother Earth as part of our shared commitment with the University of Saskatchewan and the Saskatchewan Near Networks. We honor and support the Indigenous peoples, cultures, values, and languages that belong to these treaties and the territory and the homeland within the Métis. But beyond acknowledging the land, I also want to acknowledge the systemic issues that we face, especially here in Saskatchewan, whether it's healthcare, social sciences, or any of that. We need to do better. And that's what I hope you'll think about as you create your own land acknowledgements. I did learn a new word. It's Saskatchewan. That is, I mangled it. I'm sorry. Anyway, that's how you say Saskatchewan. We invite each of you right now to, again, I see a couple in the chat, just dump in where you're from, what you're grateful for. And if you'd like to share your own land acknowledgement there, please do so. And I'd also like to welcome to KM in the AM, our Saskatchewan-based community of practice for people who care about knowledge mobilization, our wonderful speaker today. Dawn is a colleague, and I would venture to say friend. And Dawn is a former English professor who understands both the arcane delights of research and challenges of translating complex concepts into language and visuals that really land with readers of whoever that she's trying, or whoever her audience is. Through her company, Clarity Connect, she helps researchers develop communication skills they need to influence partners, policymakers, and funders so their ideas can drive positive change. Dawn offers practical results-oriented training that help bridge bridge the gap between high-level frameworks for knowledge mobilization and on-the-ground execution. She's an expert at impact, I would say. So let's give Dawn a warm KM in the AM welcome. And I'm going to hand the presentation over to Dawn. And like she said, we're going to get to work right away here.
Thank you, Bonnie, and thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and meet some folks from Saskatchewan. I see a few folks from Ottawa as well. I have been to Saskatchewan only once. I was in Regina a few years ago for a conference on the future of the university, what it means to be a university. And so I feel like I'm almost virtually there a second time. So that's a treat. This will be a very interactive session. There will be opportunities for you to participate by chat. There'll be opportunities for you to do some work in small groups in the breakout rooms using your microphone, and opportunities for us to do some playing with a whiteboard. I would invite you, if you're somewhere where you're able to use your camera and you feel comfortable doing that, I would invite you to do that. As I've said, this will be very conversational, and sometimes seeing faces just helps the conversation flow a little more freely. I'm going to share my screen now. And I expect that this presentation will take us an hour, 75 minutes maybe. It really depends on how many questions we have. how the discussion goes. And then anytime that we have available after that, I am happy to answer specific questions you have about how you can apply what you've learned here in your context. And that's what it's all about. Okay. Building capacity through team coaching. As Bonnie mentioned, my area of expertise is really communication. And I've practiced that craft as a professor. I've practiced it as a communications consultant. I've practiced it as a learning designer. So this whole conversation will really kind of be framed by that background. And communication is such a hard thing to really define. The closest metaphor I could think for describing communication is electricity. How do you describe electricity? Right? It's everywhere. And yet it's nowhere. We can't see it. And I wonder if anybody has actually had this question. I was trying to remember back to when my children were small. Did they ever ask me what electricity was? Because I think I really would have been stumped. Using your knowledge mobilization skills here, how would you describe electricity to a 5-year-old? You can use the chat, grab your mic. Makes the world go and glow. Yeah, it's power that's everywhere. But it's not easy to define. I find the same thing with communication. When you think about it, communication plays a role in every skill area, every behavior that it takes to turn research into impact. You may be familiar with the article I'm going to refer to here, which is by Bailey, Phipps, and others, a 2017 article that identifies 11 different impact competencies needed for knowledge mobilization. Change management, communication is isolated, but what do we mean by it? That's a big question mark. Creating, sourcing, and synthesizing knowledge, evaluating the impact of knowledge mobilization, facilitating and negotiating, leading and managing processes, managing legal issues and IP, managing partnerships and relationships, networking and engaging stakeholders, training and capacity building. So what strikes me is that communication is given one line here, and often we take that to mean in some way producing communication products. But actually communication is embedded in each and every of these other competencies. I was actually surprised a while ago. I recently got my consulting company listed with the federal government as one of the go-to companies they can use. Got it on the standing offer. That's the word. And I was really surprised when I described what they did. They categorized what I did as change management, right? So, and I do teach communication to drive change. I'm also continually surprised because I'll often have conversations with researchers that go something like this. Oh, you do communication. That's interesting. And then I'll ask, how do you find it communicating your research outside the academy? And the answer I'll get, oh, yeah, we don't really have any trouble with communication. That's not an issue. But it is hard to get buy-in for our ideas. So again, people are thinking of communication in a very kind of narrow way, when I would argue that it is, in fact, the power, the electricity that's going through, you might say, the whole power grid of knowledge mobilization. So in our time together today, we're going to explore how you identify the core communication skills your team needs. And we'll see that we're going to really broaden that idea of communication. We'll also talk about how you can develop strategies for sustainable knowledge mobilization by leveraging team strengths. It's really easy when you're in the kind of work we're in, where resources are often not plentiful. It's really easy to think about what we don't have. You know, we don't have a videographer in house. Maybe we don't have a comms specialist in house. We don't have the ability to host that gala event we would like to host. We're going to kind of flip that around and think about how identifying your team strengths can actually help shape your strategy. And then I will introduce you to the exact method that I use with clients when I work with small teams doing co-creation and coaching together. I'll give you a little background on how this method has developed. I'll walk you through a case study. And you can, if you are managing a small team, part of a small team, you can actually use this same method yourself. Okay, so with that, how do you identify the core communication skills your team needs to develop, right? Because we know communication is that electricity is just flowing everywhere. So how do you do that? I would start by thinking about a typical week, or you could stretch that to a slightly larger period if it makes more sense for your work to think in terms of a month. But the thing is to really identify all of the different communication activities that your team engages in. Now, to do this, it helps to have some kind of a structure, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to work together on populating a whiteboard that I have created. So let me pull this up, and you will be able to write on the whiteboard, and I'll tell you how to do that. All right, so you should all be able to see the whiteboard. Great, I see 2 people are following, 3 people are following. Miranda's already on the board. Great. So you can see that what I've done here is to take those 11 different categories, those impact competencies, and we have a column roughly for each of them. Oh, what happened to our lines are moving around. What I'd like you to do is under each of these columns, identify the communication activities that your team has been involved in the past week, or if you want to stretch that further to the past month. So for instance, if we look under the networking column, and I know networking can be a challenge for people coming from an academic background, one of the things I'm often asked to teach is networking skills for researchers. So, you know, what's involved in networking? Well, there is introducing yourself, making small talk, maybe following up after the event by connecting with someone on LinkedIn, pursuing the conversation on LinkedIn, further correspondence to deepen that relationship. So you see in each of these columns, there are going to be many little tasks and skills. So how do you write in this chart? Just go over to the left and you'll see a vertical strip with icons. You want to click on the T and that will open a text box. So click on the T and then click on the whiteboard where you'd like to start writing. Oh, that's great. I see we've already got some contributions here. So I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to play with this.
Sorry, Don, could you please sort of restate what exactly we're supposed to write? Because I heard a lot of the description, but I missed the very beginning in terms of is it tasks or um, activities?
Oh, tasks. Yes, I think
Okay,
of tasks as being kind of components of activities.
okay, thank you.
And then what we'll do is see what skills are required for those tasks. That networking column filling up. So we see people need email skills. They need the ability to convene meetings, hosting, so some facilitation skills there. Writing newsletters, which probably comes with some visual design requirements as well.
I think we're having trouble with the last column. Dawn, what would you
Ah,
suggest?
yes, last column.
Yeah, I don't
People might
think of
just be missing
anything.
it because it looks like it's the end of the chart. Yeah, creating and using KT tools, products, and practices. So anything that, yes, infographics, videos, plays, podcasts, clinical guidelines, anything that you would consider a knowledge product would go into that category. Giving feedback, that is definitely a skill that involves a lot of communication. Seeing email show up in a couple of columns. Move over this last column here, which is hard to see under the navigation. Having meetings to discuss the why. Oh, yes. More facilitation skills. Hey.
And yeah, I think it's those facilitation skills that give a lot of us trouble in when we're working. Having a skilled facilitator at any meeting I found was amazing. To have just keep things moving and growing and going and not devolving into conversations that take us way off track.
It's interesting. You and I were talking earlier, Bonnie, about the new micro credential in communication skills for knowledge mobilization that I've just launched through Dalhousie University. And next week, I think we're looking, of course, at some of the more popular frameworks for knowledge mobilization. And of course, the acronym has escaped me. Maybe someone here can remind me of it. I know it comes from the health sphere, but I noted that there's one framework out there that makes facilitation a key component of it. Oh, yes, the acronym escapes me. But I think you're right, because that's kind of like, in many ways, like that's how you get the electricity flowing.
Well,
Okay.
not just flowing, but maintaining that momentum throughout a meeting, right? It's hard to maintain that positive and if you only have half an hour meetings, or whatever that timeline is, you really have to get good at facilitating meetings in an expert way, like just to keep the momentum moving to the end of the meeting, and then sending folks off energized enough to do whatever they agreed to do. Right. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a facilitator, and I don't have a whole lot of those skills, but I am learning, and I never stop learning. And I find skilled facilitators to be just awesome people, because they really do make the work a lot easier.
Mm-hmm. Um, you're going to love today's newsletter, which is how to rock a meeting with an industry or community partner. And although, as I'm thinking, there's one item I forgot, which was always make sure people leave with action steps. I talk a lot about the need to prepare for a meeting, get your agenda, and focus on your outcomes. But if you don't reinforce those outcomes when people leave, um, so yeah, those of you who are interested in building that skill set, there's a great book called Fearless Facilitation that I found really helpful. Um, I would also say one of the ways that I've gotten better, particularly the kind of facilitation you've just mentioned, Bonnie, running a meeting, is by watching people who ace that skill, right? I can remember a few years ago, I had the opportunity to work quite closely with a VP at a university. And I would just watch how she took control of that room, how she was like her presence, how did she take charge without saying, hey, I'm in charge here, and just to watch what she used. So there's, yes, it's lovely to have somebody who has like I'm a professional facilitator badge, but these are also
Mhm.
skills that we can develop. And reflection is one of the top skills that you can develop in your team, so that they really cultivate this ability to be, when you say, oh, I'd like to develop that skill, it's not always, there's a course, right? We can learn a lot through observation. In the corporate world, there is this common ratio that's used. I could not find any legitimate research to back it up, but it's kind of like a proverb in the world of corporate training, the 70-20-10 rule. And the idea is that 70% of our skill development or professional development actually happens through on the job experiences. 20% happens through informal and social learning experiences. So that would be mentorship, bumping into a colleague in the hall, feedback from others. And then 10% happens through formal training sessions. So that's helpful to keep in
Really,
mind.
just 10% through formal
Well,
training.
again, I could not find the research, but I would say this is one of these guidelines that learning
Mhm.
designers often think about, because so often um, somebody will think, oh, if we just give them a 6-week training course, that will be great. But in fact, you'll get probably more ROI if you invest that in a little bit of training and more performance support and more mentoring. So you'd say this is how I got involved in the team coaching, because um, over the years delivering training, as a professor, as a coach, as a consultant, you just see that so much of the learning gets lost if it's not applied right away. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, and
So
we actually see that somewhat in the KM and the AM community of practice. Like folks said, that's why we provide some key takeaways in our wrap-up emails so that people have things to put into practice today. They don't have to wait to read a book or take a class. They can start doing things today.
yeah, absolutely.
And
Absolutely. Thank
I put the sign up link for Dawn's newsletter in the chat. It'll also come through in the wrap up email. I highly suggest you sign up. It's very conversational. It's not didactic, and it's quite entertaining. And if you reply to Dawn in that email, she will reply back. Unlike other newsletters out there where a reply will go into the ether and never be heard. Dawn hears them and replies to them. So click the link and
thank
sign up
you.
today.
Thank you,
You're welcome.
Bonnie, for that shout out. Yeah. Uh, so back to our list here. So we have all of these different activities. And each of these, I'm going to say, involves, some kind of a communication skill. So once you map out what your team is doing, then you might add to this and say, what do we wish we could do? Like I would say that would be the second. So this is what we're doing. What do we wish we could do? And then what are the specific skills needed here? Now, one of the things about that list of 11 impact competencies, which I refer to quite frequently because it's a very kind of holistic, high-level view of what it takes to move research from peer review to practice. One of the things about that is those categories are incredibly broad. They're incredibly broad. So when you think, oh wow, we need to be able to, let's look at this one because we'll be talking about it later on. We need to be able to give feedback, right? So where does that fit in that impact competency list? It's under change management, but it's also under stakeholder engagement. It's also under, and so on and so forth. And what does giving feedback involve? You could break that down into many little steps. So it could be knowing the timing for giving feedback. It could be understanding how to prepare the person who's receiving the feedback. And we'll talk about this in a little bit. There's the need sometimes to cultivate what's called feedback literacy. It could be that there is the skill that's missing is the ability to provide feedback in a way that's actually usable. So oftentimes we think if we give feedback by scratching something out or editing it, like, okay, that was feedback. Well, no, not really. So there's a whole skill there. So it's really kind of, going through these piece by piece, and then you start to see some common themes. And you can start to think about where you could get the most bang for your effort in terms of building up your team. I'm going to pause there and take some questions because I'm really just curious to hear kind of what's going on for you as you see laid out all of the different activities here that your team is doing and you're thinking about the role of communication.
Hello, I can jump in. Um, can you hear me?
I sure can. And I see your question in the chat, Rebecca.
Yeah.
Bonnie, I'm happy to share the slide deck with you afterwards if that's helpful. And
Oh,
Rebecca,
fantastic.
that source is mentioned in the slide deck.
Great,
Oh,
thank you.
fantastic. So you guys don't have to take, really close notes. You'll get the information coming to you in the wrap up email in the next few days.
Yeah, so I just wanted to jump in. So I'm from a community organization that uses a knowledge translation framework. We are really looking primarily at knowledge dissemination of our population research on children and youth well-being outcomes. And we use a model where we work with 7 partners who have bought into our model. So they provide funding and other resources. And as an organization, we support these 7 organizations with research and then mobilizing research on children and youth. So communication is, like a very significant part of what we do. And I would say that a lot of the competencies like facilitating and negotiating, we don't explicitly use that framework, but we do a lot of that. But I think that partnership model is a really big part of how that communication unfolds. So I think it's kind of a bit of a unique model. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Rebecca. It sounds like that's a very dynamic model, very collaborative. I often say that when we think about knowledge mobilization, we're not actually mobilizing knowledge, we're mobilizing people. So when you talk about building partnerships, building relationships, though that to me is how you really get that electricity flowing, right? Do you remember, I remember being in elementary school or junior high, and they would give us these setups in science class, and you'd get like a little bit of copper wire, like there'd be a blue wire and a red wire and a couple of light bulbs, and you'd have to make the circuit. Do you remember that? Like anybody else? Maybe raise your Zoom hand if this sounds familiar. And so you had to put this together, and it was like about a parallel circuit versus a continual circuit, and try to get the light bulb. Okay, Alex remembers. Thank you. Right. Well, I kind of think about knowledge mobilization working like that, right? Like we can have the light bulbs in place, right? And we can have all great communication products out there ready to disseminate. But if we are not making those human connections, the circuit isn't going to light up. Thank you, Elizabeth. I'm glad that made some sense. So relationship building skills are what are so necessary, Rebecca, as you would know, to make that kind of collaborative model work. Because otherwise, as Bonnie was saying easier, you can have great conversations, but then where do they go? So, Rebecca, not to put you on the spot, but I would invite you and invite others as well to share anything that you've learned about, tips for building those relationships. Bonnie, meet people where they're at, not where you wish they would be. Yes. Which means seeing them with a great deal of empathy and understanding. Any thoughts,
And you don't
tips?
always have to have the solutions, do you? If you just meet people where they're at and you discuss what the issues are within that community, it makes your research a lot stronger and the buy-in is earlier. And so the research actually has some feet when your project is done. And then it can go into creating or helping create healthier communities, which I think is what we're all interested in.
Thank you. Alex is learning the types of communicators. Oh, I have not seen that taxonomy before, Alex. Would love to know where it came from. Although last Halloween, we did a free learning event where we talked about actually different kinds of stakeholders, and we came up with animal avatars. I know we had the peacock was one of them, the bull was one of them. So I wonder if there's any parallels here. Beginning with small asks or small goals, yes, yes. Learning to adapt to different communication styles, yes. Really important to go in with, what Buddhists call the beginner's mind, so that you are going in there to listen. One of the skills that is not listed in those 11 competencies, but maybe again it's implied in communication, is listening. As a knowledge mobilizer, listening is probably your most important skill. And that ability to, yes, think strategically about how you build those relationships. So small asks, but I would also say small promises that you deliver on. So one of the things I've learned over time is if I am meeting, let's say, Sarah for the first time to discuss a project or a new project we're working on, we don't know each other, so we're just kind of sizing each other up. Is this person going to be good to work with? And so one of the things I will try to do in that initial meeting, I will find something that I need to deliver on quickly, but something that's very small, and it could be sharing a reference, right? Like Rebecca, you asked for the reference today. It could be sharing a reference, could be offering to make a connection. It could be something as simple as saying, this was great. You'll hear from me tomorrow with a little summary of what we talked about and our next steps, right? So I've made a promise, I've followed through, so I have started to nurture that trust. Oh, thank you, Alex, for the animal personalities. What strikes me when I think about the role of a knowledge mobilizer is that it's very similar to me to the role that consultants play. Now, I happen to have spent quite a significant chunk of my career working in the world of Big Four consulting. So, global professional services firms. And I had the opportunity to work on projects quite closely with senior leaders. So I have been immersed in the world of consulting. What's interesting to me is that consultants spend a great deal of time thinking about and learning about relationship building, trust building, communication. As a consultant, those are actually your core competencies. That's the platform you're building on. One of the classic books for consultants is called Trusted Advisor. And it's really about, how do you show up consistently for people so that they don't see you as an outsider who's parachuting in with a solution. They're seeing you as their go-to. They're coming to you and saying, gee, how can we solve this? And when I talk to knowledge mobilizers, I'd be really interested. I don't want to assume that that's been your experience. So let me turn this into the question. Have any of you kind of run into that experience of working, let's say, with researchers or with senior leaders and kind of getting a little bit of pushback or experiencing a little bit of disconnection sometime because, you don't know the research? Alex says every day. Alex, that's in capital letters. I'm feeling like there's a story behind there or some emotion. Feel free to grab your mic if you'd like to expand on that. Ah, okay, that's right. Yeah. And the DISC personalities, yes, that's another interesting tool talking about how people work together. Yes, how they are effectively managed. So a lot of these different personality profiling tools have specific uses. One of my favorites is actually a tool called Simplexity, and it is designed to actually identify how people work together best to solve complex problems and innovate. The DISC profile is designed to see how you can best manage somebody. Okay. So lots of cooks in the kitchen. Yes. So how do you, and often I think as a boundary spanner, as a knowledge broker, knowledge mobilizer, we're often in a position where we need to lead without having that leader badge. So some of those facilitation skills, those trust building skills, the ability to articulate very clearly what your purpose is, all of these are so important for getting the work done. And I think a lot of times, I work a lot with graduate students, And graduate students are very interested in knowledge mobilization, and they think about it as producing something. I'm going to produce a podcast. I'm going to produce an infographic. But really, the knowledge mobilization piece to me is making sure that you're making those connections in the circuit. Okay. So I'm going to, I was going to say there, oh, you were able to access the whiteboard. Okay, great. Yes, I shouldn't have to do a screen share. I never quite trust technology, so often I will take a photo of it as well. Okay. Okay. So once you've identified those tasks that your team is doing, and then you're thinking about what are those kind of nitty-gritty skills underneath there that we might need to work on. Then let's talk about how you can develop a strategy that's sustainable by leaning into your team strengths. So how many people here today wish they had more money and more resources to do knowledge mobilization? I'm going to put 2 hands up. As some of you know, Clarity Connect is building an online learning platform for knowledge mobilizers. There are never enough hours in the day. Wish I had more. My hands. Yes. Bonnie says the same. Monica. Okay. So here's what I'm going to tell you is it's really easy to get into this deficit mindset and think, oh, if only, if only we had this, if only had that. Funds do not fix everything. And it could be that what is holding you back from achieving some of your goals is actually not money, but it could have more to do with the way you are capitalizing on team strengths and working together effectively as a team. I was really fortunate earlier in my career to see firsthand what a really tight, well-coordinated, passionate team could do. I worked for an e-learning company based in Halifax, and we served global clients. We only had one client in Canada I can remember, and that was because what we delivered was expensive, so it had to be delivered at scale. And we would regularly win projects from competitors who were twice or 3 times our size, right? And every day we came in and said, boy, we punch above our weight. But that really forced us to be innovative. So I don't want to dismiss or downplay like whatever reality you're living with. And I know for many people, budgets are really tight, time is really tight. But I would challenge you to get a little bit out of deficit mode and think, what can you do by actually embracing the constraints and embracing your team's strengths? In the world of innovation, and I often kind of, am talking to people who are more on the innovation side than on the knowledge mobilization side. So, tech transfer people, for instance, people spinning out startups from their research. There have been a number of studies that have said that small, resourceful teams can actually be more innovative than larger teams that have more slack, right? In a large team, there's room for redundancy. Let me tell you a story about the New Brunswick healthcare system. So my husband, unfortunately, is what I would call a frequent flyer in the healthcare system. He has multiple conditions and has had 5 different kinds of cancer. He's going in for surgery again shortly. So he sees lots of doctors. So one day he was in to see a new doctor and said, boy, I cannot believe in New Brunswick, in this tiny underfunded province, the quality of care I'm getting. Like everybody here is just an amazing doctor to deal with. And the physician's response was not, oh, it's so hard here, which it really is. I mean, we know everywhere in Canada, the system's held together with duct tape. His response was, well, you have to be good to work in New Brunswick. in New Brunswick, the resources are so scarce that we have to be at the top of our game and we have to collaborate. Right? So I have definitely been in situations where, like, oh, here's a huge pot of money. Now we can hire 3 people. And 3 years later, we're still kind of dancing around, not sure what we're doing. So focus is a superpower. And leaning into your team strengths can actually help you find that focus. So this is where you are going to have some time to chat one-on-one, because I want you to spend a few minutes thinking about what your team strengths are, so that you can think about how you're going to build on those. Some of you may be familiar with a change management methodology called appreciative inquiry. I am not an AI practitioner. That was AI before we had AI. But I do really endorse this strengths-based approach, because it is always easier to start with strengths than to fill in the gaps, even though this can be counterintuitive. I will give you an example, small example, kind of from my own personal development journey. For my entire life, I have had what I would call a severe phone allergy. I mean that I wouldn't, pick up the phone even to call a friend. Like, that would be painful. And even today, I probably would rather text, or I would email a friend instead of a coffee date. I then found myself in a role in which I needed to call people. So how did I learn how to do that? I leveraged my strength, which was learning from writing. So the first thing I did is I went and I got a book. I got a book by the phone lady. Anybody here is working on their phone skills? Mary Jane Copps is the phone lady. She has a great little book. And so I read and I learned. There were little scripts in that. Somebody else would have found it easier to ask a friend or go to a workshop or so on. So it's really tapping into your strengths. I see some folks can only stay till 12. Bonnie, do you want to do the breakouts toward the end as maybe a instead?
Yeah, it's up to you. I see, yes. So the way this normally works is we book 90 minutes, but if folks have to leave after an hour, they'll be able to catch up later.
Okay, so let's rearrange a little bit here. And what I'll do is I'll finish this presentation, which hopefully will spark some ideas. And for those of you who want to stay and have some time in the breakout rooms, or just stay and chat with me and think about how to apply this in your world, we can do that. Okay, thank you for letting me know that. Okay. When we're in the deficit model, the other thing that can happen is we think about building processes, and we build the process first and then fit the people in. And so when you approach kind of the way you are developing your strategy and also your operations from this team-based approach, you get the people in place first, and they actually mold the systems, which means there aren't really any rules. Like, it's always best to do it this way. No, it's what works for you and your team. Now, you have to know what your team strengths are. The CEO I worked with at the e-learning company was a brilliant entrepreneur. And he said, you have to get the right people on the bus, and then you see where you'll drive. Right? You have impact goals. You know what you want to achieve in terms of outcomes, but there are going to be multiple routes that you could take to get there. So rather than assuming, well, University of Waterloo does it this way, so we better do it this way. Or I read the latest article from Research Impact Canada that said do it this way, so we should do it this way. Now, Research Impact Canada doesn't give that kind of, rule-bound advice, so that was a bad example. But what I'm saying is taking an example of like an academic publication and saying, okay, that's the right way we're going to do it. What resources do you have at your disposal now? You have the people. And the more you learn about what they can do and what their strengths are, the better you can then shape your strategy around that. So you might think, oh, we want to do something, we want to reach an audience, a broad audience. So let's do a podcast. But guess what? Everybody on the team hates public speaking. No, maybe a podcast isn't the right strategy for you at this time. So you can either sit and fold your hands and say, oh, if only we had money for a podcast. I guess we'll have to wait till next year. Or you could say, what could we do now? Oh, Janny's a great writer. We could do some social media posts. Oh, do you know what? So-and-so has a connection to the person who wrote this blog. Maybe we could do a guest blog over there. Maybe we've got a story we can pitch to the local media, right? So it's thinking about multiple ways to achieve a goal and what your team's strengths will allow you to do. So let me let you in on how team coaching works. Those of you who have to leave at 12, feel free to follow up with me with any questions you have. And I'll give you my email here so you'll have it. LinkedIn is also a great place to connect with me. So traditional training, as we know, fights what's called the learning curve. And as you can see, and as you said, Bonnie, the minute you learn something, you start to forget it. And so, even an hour from now, I am sorry, but you will not remember a lot of what we talked about unless you immediately start applying it, right? So in the corporate world, going back decades now, there has been a shift towards just-in-time learning because that really shortens the gap between learning and application. And often we need to learn when we're in the crisis. So the moment for this person to learn how to change her oil filter, whatever she needs to do here, change her fan belt, was not 6 months ago, right? Because if she had taken a course on roadside maintenance 6 months ago, she's lost it all. But look, she has a little guidebook. In her glove box, she pulls it out and she can take care of what needs to be taken care of. So this is really, we know this is how people learn. This is how people grow. And yet we often insist on some of these more formal structured models because they're easier to manage in some ways. And really, they are what we're used to. Now, the team coaching model I developed came out of a conversation, a couple conversations with different clients, actually. And Carol Goodine was one of them. So she was a pharmacy practice manager in a hospital doing a research project on how to help seniors transition from the hospital back home after they've had a stay in the hospital, a medical stay. So not an operation, but some kind of a medical stay. And of course, seniors can get very confused because you go in and you've got all these meds, then you have something done, and then they give you a whack of new meds, and you can't remember, what you're supposed to keep taking, and you got this whole armful of pills. What do you do? And so a lot of people actually become boomerang patients, and they go back in to the hospital because of this confusion. So this was her project, and she was getting ready for an event at which there were going to be many different kinds of stakeholders. So she wanted some help thinking about how she would communicate with them. Now, she was on a tight timeline, 3 weeks out. She wanted to build up the skills of her team. She had mainly a junior team, including a student. And as a former manager of experiential learning, I knew how to conduct experiential learning, how to provide those opportunities for experience and reflection and interpretation and application. And I knew that wasn't going to get us to a professional level, dynamite presentation and hand out whatever else she wanted for her upcoming event. So we had to come up with something different. And this is where we developed this very collaborative approach, co-creation married with coaching. So it starts with a detailed needs assessment. This is something I have learned to do as a learning designer, to really go in and listen carefully for what the needs are. And often the needs that somebody states are not the needs that are really there. So to give you an example, I have deep background in teaching writing. Clients will typically say, oh, they just can't put a sentence together. There's so many grammar problems. And then I would actually look at writing samples and say, this isn't grammar. There are actually structural issues here. Your people have trouble with logical structuring. And once we get that sorted, you're telling me everybody here has a university degree. I'm sure they can put a sentence together. So it's listening, like really deeply listening and interrogating assumptions. And then we would develop a roadmap that consists of learning objectives and the outputs we're going to create. So the two at the same time. So in this case, we decided we would create a presentation, we would create a handout, and we decided to create a game that they could use at their booth during this conference, a board game, an interactive board game that was meant as a conversation starter. Those are the outputs. Married with that is the coaching. So we had specific learning outcomes. So they wanted to learn how to create a presentation, an effective presentation for an audience of experts and non-experts. That was one of the goals. They had some goals about visual design. So we have those two things going in, and those objectives and the outputs, those become what we measure the project against at the end. Then I typically hold a visioning session with clients where we really think in depth about the audience we're trying to reach and the change that we want to make in that audience. What do we want to happen as a result of putting these outputs into the world? Then we went through a process of co-creation with coaching. So I helped a little bit with the ideation. Then they went away and they built stuff. Then they came back. I gave them feedback. In the case of the presentation, with feedback, they were able to get it to a point where they were comfortable presenting it. With the handout, I actually pitched in at the end and did a little bit of writing and editing to get it to the level they wanted to get it. And the board game I took on as my part of the project. So we conceptualized the board game together. We came up with these little scenario cards together, and then my team and I went and built it. But throughout this process, this is not just co-creation as you may be thinking of it, as in the knowledge user and the knowledge mobilizers, knowledge creators coming together with some ideas. There's a coaching baked in, which is not the same as correcting. So for those of you who have a team reporting to you, how do you switch from correcting to coaching? It's largely a mental shift because you are thinking not just of developing the communication product in front of you, but of developing the person. Okay? So partly this is about building feedback literacy, which means creating a culture in which people appreciate feedback, enabling people to make judgments based on the feedback. So you actually have to teach people how to use feedback. And you can do that through the way you give the feedback. You can also do that kind of outside of that by coming up with some standards about how we give feedback, for instance. I will often work with teams to create things like assessment tools that they can use to have feedback conversations. You also have to create a climate in which people feel safe and secure. so that they are able to emotionally self-regulate as they get the feedback. And you have to make sure that the feedback enables them to apply insights. So it's not just, oh, that's interesting. It's an interesting thought, but here's how you can actually use it. For me, this has meant coaching from the margins. So whenever I am commenting on a piece of writing, a podcast script, a video script, impact report, draft, whatever, I am always giving feedback in a way that is actually raising questions and pushing the creator kind of back into the communication product so that they can make changes to it. So again, it's not about fixing. It's not, okay, you did this wrong, now do it this way. It's about consciously developing the skill set so that people can make judgments and apply things on their own. And it's a skill that you develop over time. I mentioned earlier that self-reflection is a really key skill to develop among your team. I learned this again a long time ago as a writing instructor early in my career, because when you're commenting on some kind of a communication product, what you are really trying to do, as Summer says here, is to dramatize the presence of a reader or an audience, right? So that the person receiving the feedback is able to become a questioning reader. They're able to kind of see things from that other perspective. We want them to grow. So self-reflection is really what you are trying to build as you are doing the coaching process. That should be the focus of your work as a coach. And this is an uber skill. This is the super skill, is self-reflection, because it builds not only competence but also confidence. Now, David Schoen is somebody who has done a lot of work on reflection and professional development. Way back in the 80s, he wrote this book called The Reflective Practitioner. And he looked at how different professionals develop. And he looked at different occupation groups. I can't remember all of them, but engineering was one of them. And then there was quite a variety of different groups he looked at. And what he found was that both novice and seasoned practitioners engage in reflection, but the seasoned practitioner is able to do so much more quickly. For the novice practitioner, they're doing something, and then if they have time, they're unpacking it, they're thinking about it, what are the lessons learned, what can I do better next time? Whereas your experienced practitioner is actually doing this seamlessly. They are reflecting as they act, reflection in action, as Schoen said. So when you are able to work with your team in a way that is a coaching approach, you are paying attention to their strengths, cultivating their strengths, and you are providing feedback in such a way that it develops the skill of self-reflection. And then finally, we wrap up with a project debrief. Again, we had our learning outcomes. We had the outputs, which were also supposed to achieve some outcomes. Did they work? So for instance, the game. The game was meant to attract people to the booth and to serve as an icebreaker so that the people at the booth could talk about their research and why it mattered. Change always starts with a conversation. So the aim was to get those conversations going rather than just have a static handout. And Carol did say it was the best icebreaker they'd ever had at an event. So, okay, so we met our outcomes. I then left the team with some tools. So some performance support tools, like that woman with the repair manual at the side of the road, making sure that down the road they could continue to implement the processes, the approach that we had been working on together. So that's how the team coaching married with co-creation works. And yeah, I would invite you to kind of check out more of kind of some materials that we're developing on our online platform, the Learning Commons, because we really are trying to provide some just-in-time resources that you can use with your team. But I'll stop there for now, because I do want to make sure that you have a chance to ask me any questions. And I particularly would like to know, as you've listened, kind of what strengths are you thinking about in your team that you want to tap into to achieve your impact goals. And if anybody would like to, we can even do a little bit of live coaching now, if that would be helpful.
So I really like that you talk about collaboration as part of this process, because even if we are a solo entity like you and I are in our consultancy businesses, that we still have to collaborate outside of that and figuring out who those collaborators should be and what skills you need to bring onto your team. Once you do that skill inventory, what do you need to reach the goals after that? And sometimes that's the hardest thing right there, is figuring out who sits at this table and how are we going to work with them. So maybe you have some tips, Dawn?
So can you give me an example of like the kind of person you would be thinking would fit that gap? Like, are you thinking about like a creative professional, or are you thinking about somebody who's more of like an interested party, a community partner or something?
I guess I'm really thinking of all of the above, right? So if we sit down and figure out
Yes.
what our goals, right? So now we've got these goals, but we may not always have all of the skills. Like personally,
Right.
I don't have really strong financial skills, so I always look for somebody to work with who has those skills. And I'm lucky enough to have a colleague, Fleur McQueen Smith, who actually is the co-creator of KM in the AM.
Ah,
And she is actually very good, and she knows the university's policies inside and out. I mean, she's worked in and off the university for such a long time that she's learned this by trial and error. And like you talked about at the beginning, she learned how to do these things when the answer was needed now. So it became a crisis or a challenge that had to be solved
yes.
right away. And that's how she's learned. And because she had to put that into practice right away, right? So if it was with a grant and the grant is due and she needs these answers and she has to find out where to get the answers, she's very good at that. And so she actually has this huge inventory of skills that I don't have. And they actually complement what I do. So when we work together, even with KM in the AM, we're able to collaborate in that way where I can give her part of the work, she gives, and I have part of the work, and it works like almost as smooth as a machine works, right? Because we've got
Oh,
the
wonderful.
work
Yeah.
down, but you know what? I have that gap in my skills, and I know that.
Yeah.
So every time I start a new project, I have to figure out who do I need to connect with and and so that they can contribute their skills and achieve success for not just me, but for both of us and whoever else is sitting at that table. But it's
Oh,
sitting at that table, like who do we bring
yeah.
in when,
Hmm.
yeah. So if you
Yeah.
have some
So
tips on,
I hear a couple of things there. The first is the importance of building a network. And this is something that I have learned slowly and painfully, because earlier in my career, I am so introverted. It was really hard for me to network. Now I teach networking, particularly to the research community, because when you have a strong network, then that's how you can find somebody. So I'm working on a project right now, and it's about moving an evidence-based program from a university lab to a community partner. And so there are lots of conversations going on with various NGOs and government people and so on. And I have pulled in a colleague from my network who has a financial background, so she's helping with that. But she also has this vast network in New Brunswick. So we are not ever needing kind of to make a cold call to the people we want to reach. Like we're able through the network to make a warm call. And if we, so I would also say, my business is almost 7 years old. And when I first started my business, I didn't have much of a network at all. So I went through a spate of terrible hires. And honestly, sounds like a bad breakup line, but it wasn't them, it was me, like not knowing how to hire. And I got really good at firing because I had to learn that skill in the moment. Then, about a year and a half ago, I decided I was ready to bring on an assistant as a contractor. And through the network, I found the most amazing person whom you have met, I think, in some of our sessions. But that was like one call to somebody in my network. So really, networking is a key skill for knowledge mobilizers. If you're in an academic setting, you don't get a lot of chance to practice it. So it's finding opportunities, make yourself a challenge. Ask somebody from a different department to go to coffee with you, or challenge yourself to take a yoga class at lunch just so you can meet somebody from another department. Check out a virtual conference if you don't have money for an online conference. Come to KM in the AM, and then follow up with somebody whose name you see in the list. Share your LinkedIn contact, when you're at an event.
And that's an important part of KM in the AM, is helping these folks connect with each other. And do put your LinkedIn URL in the chat, please. We're saving the chat and we can connect afterwards as well. But Dawn, I see Elizabeth has a question. So go ahead, Elizabeth.
Well, I'm going to take your advice and as an introvert, do some connecting. Thank you so much. I've been coming to these for a while. It's the first time I've asked a question. I was curious, actually, Bonnie, building on the things that you brought up in terms of knowing what your strengths are and what gaps. Like we can't do all the things. I'm wondering, Dawn, if you could speak a little bit about that kind of skills assessment and how to destigmatize it. Like I'm terrible at scheduling, but I know that about myself. But how do you say that in a way that maybe feels safe within a team, or kind of like how do you, as a leader, model that humility that allows the maybe more junior folks on your team to say, "Oh, I'm really great at this, but I'm not good at this," and that kind of coaching mentality. I find that such a great reframe, but it's also it's not necessarily so common, especially if you're coming up through an academic, like a graduate school training. Like, how do you, it's something that I'm encountering more and more in my staff roles. So I'm just curious about, how to lead with humility, but also develop humility so that your team members can feel safe to say, like, hey, I think I need a little bit more, I need the manual, or I need a little more skills training, and not feel like it's too unmasking of a deficit.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's very astute. I mean, it requires a lot of vulnerability to say, this is something I'd like to develop. Humility in a leader is really powerful. Again, I go back to my brilliant boss when I worked at the e-learning company. He was so brilliant at that, because we all felt we were free to fail at any time, because we were encouraged to try things. And if it flopped, great, cool, that was cool, you tried it. So there was a lot of that. But he also did a lot of modeling. He would have a terrible time with scheduling. Now, this man was a CPA. He was very well organized, in mind like a steel trap, but traveling was a challenge. So I'd say, oh, shoot, I ended up in New York a day early again. I got the wrong day on the airplane ticket. One time he came home and we said, like, where's your laptop? He came to the office, he had no laptop. Oh, I left it at customs. Like, we're just like, so then it was okay if we forgot a meeting or, something. So that modeling is something that you can do with confidence, right? Like, there was no shame when he said that. It's not like I'm a bad person or I'm a stupid person. It was like, oh, this happened. The other thing I would say is I've learned this from Carol Dweck, whose work you may know. She is a researcher who studies mindset, and particularly the growth mindset. Yeah. So one of the things you
Amazing.
may
Yeah.
remember that she says is, I don't know how to do this yet.
Mhm.
That's a powerful reframe. Um, the third thing I would say is when you're dealing with a staff member or is thinking about what do you need to know now that you can lean into so that you can figure this out. Because I'm a business owner, I read, follow kind of different entrepreneurial people. And one of the folks I follow is Marie Forleo. And she has a book called Everything is Figure Outable. So you can kind of cultivate some of that. Like, okay, so you want to do a podcast. The podcast course you've looked at is $1,500. Okay, like what's one small thing? You can absolutely do a podcast. And how do we figure this out? Like, what's the next step, or what's one small thing? Recognizing that we're all learning. Actually, that's another great strategy too, is to just create a culture of learning. So maybe if you have a weekly staff meeting, everybody brings in one tip they've learned this week.
Oh, I love that. That's great. Thanks so much. And also really love the not everyone has to do a podcast if you don't want to do a podcast, because I worked with researchers and like not everyone has to do social media if you don't want to do social media. Thank you for that permission. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Work with like where your strengths lie.
I guess it's only through working for a long time that you figure out what those are. So I think that when we're in meetings and, like you said, model the behavior for the younger folks who may not have developed their skill set or may not even know what their skill set is, and provide that sort of mentorship and guidance to, folks newer to the workplace, folks in their 20s or 30s who are just kind of figuring out where their space is and who they are and what they do and why they do it, right? It's about the why do you do what you do, and it's about that passion. And if we can connect with that passion with people, and I've found in my work history, if you find that passion, it is so much easier to do the rest of the work. So I've worked as a speechwriter, and it was really about finding that spark in somebody and then being able to replicate how they speak and their nuances and in a speech. And that is a skill that's not easy. That's the skill that kind of pushes out the numbers, right? So it's like that's where my focus is, and it push away the numbers. And but really, at this stage in the game, I'm no longer 30, as you can tell. But it's at this stage in the game, I really try to find that spark, what makes that person do what they do, and then guide them to really use that to propel them forward in whatever they're going to learn. Right. So for me, I'm a writer, and that's at the core of everything I do. I'm a writer. I have a writer's curiosity. I ask lots of questions. That's where my skill set is. And that's what makes me great at knowledge mobilization and building those relationships. Now, I'm also an introvert, so that wasn't an easy skill to develop or figure out that I actually enjoyed doing, right? Connecting with people and building those relationships and keeping people engaged. And that's where my skill set is. And I try to bring that through everything that I do. Now, I'm not opposed to learning numbers. However, I've got FLIR, so I don't have to. It's like I
Exactly. You're
have a good,
leaning into your strengths.
and but for the younger set, it's really hard for them. And I think those of us who have been in the industry for a while, it really is part of what we need to do, is help people engage it with those skills and let them figure out where their strengths lie, right? So
Yes.
it's
And part
it's
of that
sometimes
is
we
also particularly with the kind of the Gen Z group, whom I'm very familiar with because A, I have a Gen Z daughter, but B, I've spent time fairly recently in the experiential learning space, so working with student interns and so on. One of the things that can happen is kind of a misreading of one's own skills. And I forget the name for it. Is it the Dunning-Kruger effect? Anyway, if you are somebody who's very skilled, you will be harder on yourself in your self-assessment. If you are somebody who's actually not great, you are likely to overestimate your skills. And so that's why the needs assessment piece is so vital, and you have to listen beyond what people say, because we also have a generation that has gone through school and university, and it's been a lot of like positive reinforcement. And you may be, as an employer, you may be the first person who has ever told them this isn't good enough. Like, it's not good enough to go out the door. It needs a little polishing, or your public speaking could use some work. That may be the first time they've heard that. So it's making sure that you are assessing skills, not totally relying on self-assessment, and then finding ways to create that psychological safety and that feedback literacy so that they are clear that they are not being harassed if you ask them to do something over again. Because I did encounter that when we worked with student interns, that student interns would come in and say, like, I'm being bullied, I'm being harassed, and then kind of try to unpack it. And it's like, well, sounds to me like you were asked to redo this task. Like, that doesn't necessarily mean you're being harassed. But in that workplace, there wasn't a clear understanding of what skills were required, where they were at, and how feedback would help them, close that gap.
I think that's so very important with any team we're on, is to operate in the way you just described, and figuring out, what is bullying, what is actually pushing you to do better, and defining what that is within the team setting. So everybody's on the same page. And I know some of us, when we see those treat people with respect and, all of those sort of community rules at the beginning, it's like, that's just so basic. But for many people, it's not basic.
That's right.
Especially, right? There's cultural differences, there's
Yes.
age differences where geographical differences, and that all affects who we are, what we learn, and how we learn it. And when we figure out how people learn the best, sometimes it is a webinar, but sometimes it's, reading. For me, it's reading. Give me stuff to read, I will read it, and I will wow you afterwards. But some people
Yes, I'm the same.
don't.
That's why I read the book about how
Yeah,
to use the phone, which sounds counterintuitive.
right.
Yeah.
And that's okay, right? To entertain those differences. But some people, it's watching. Like, I've
Yes.
noticed with KM and AM, there's the video, recording the video and putting it up on YouTube is very popular, because not everybody who signed up doesn't necessarily have the time to attend. And having that option afterwards really does mobilize our knowledge, and it keeps it mobile. But I see we have 5 minutes left. So if there's any questions, throw them in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourselves and turn your video off and say hi. This is the last one we will do before we head into Christmas holidays. So we likely won't have another session until January 2026. There might be something impromptu pop up, and if it does, you'll get the email all about it. Share our emails with your friends and your colleagues that you think are interested in learning more about knowledge mobilization. I will do the wrap-up email over the next couple of days and I'll make sure to include all the resources you've added into the chat, and Dawn's slides that she was sharing, and a few other resources we can think up that might be of value to folks.
Yeah. One thing I was thinking as you were talking, Bonnie, is that these skills that you use with your team, and I love that idea of looking for the spark, looking for the spark. How do you figure out what motivates people? How do you connect with them? How do you use that to create that, closed circuit? Um, those are the identical skills to me that you're going to use as you actually mobilize knowledge outside your team. So
Mhm.
actually, a lot of the skills required to work with the team and develop their capacity are directly translatable to the work you do outside as a group.
Yeah, it's so true. Oh, I'm glad you joined us, Elizabeth. I'm glad you had a good time, and I hope everybody has a few takeaways they can put in practice today because, as we mentioned, it doesn't retain in our brains until we put it into practice. And thank you, Dawn, for this session. It was very powerful. I learned a whole bunch, and I hope our participants did as well. Again, this will be up on the YouTube channel, so you can watch it again if needs be. And Dawn's email will be included, so you can actually ask her questions after the fact. If you're like me, a question will pop up 10 minutes after you close the session.
Absolutely.
All
Happy to
right.
chat.
Fantastic. So thanks for coming, everybody. We'll close up the call here. There's 3 minutes left. And unless you have another question on your brain, then we'll let everyone get back to their day. Perfect.
Thank you so
Perfect.
much, Bonnie. Lovely to spend some time with all of you.
This was great. Thank you, Dawn. And we'll see like I said, our next learning session will be in January and details will land in your inbox shortly.
Thank you so
Bye,
much.
everybody.
Take care.
Bye.